Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Brenda and I, our Friday morning chat. We're going to go live today, and we're going to be talking about emotional intelligence, emotional maturity. And the reason we're going live today, we want to make sure that people, if you have any questions, you want to ask us questions. We're not putting ourselves out as experts, but we do know what we're talking about because it comes up in our line of work so much. If people are struggling with difficulties, that they want a hand, they want to find their way through. So we're going to start letting people in. Admit all.
Just realized
In the reading room.
I better change that so it can be seen properly.
So Catherine, we're going to ask you to mute yourself, if you will. So we're going to ask, oh, here we go. I just found the mute button. Andrea, hi, Andrea. I'm going to mute you for now, okay?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. So we're going to wait for a few more people to come in. And we're just introducing what we're talking about today in terms of emotional intelligence and why it's so important. And Brenda and I both work with people who sometimes have gone through a lot of traumatic experiences. And what that does, it makes them lack confidence in themselves. And when people lack confidence in themselves, they're not always making great decisions for themselves. So this is why we want to talk about it and encourage people to be able to trust themselves when they're making decisions. This is a really big conversation for a lot of people. There's a reason emotional intelligence isn't taught in a screwed up system as well. And the reason they don't teach emotional intelligence, they love chaos. There's a darkness in our society that loves chaos. And if we don't know how to esteem ourselves and trust ourselves, then what ends up happening is you turn to an expert to give you answers, when all this time you should be looking at yourself for your own answers and trusting in yourself. That's kind of what we think anyway. So did you want to add to that, Brenda?
Well, I wholeheartely agree with that. And I do believe that it's another way to disempower us, to keep us out of touch with ourselves, keep us separate from our importance and our priority and our value, right? Self-worth and trust. What a way to knock both of them, out of the park and knock us on our knees to do it.
And it's been too long since we've actually been, anybody's been willing to call it exactly what it is. That is what it's done. It's done to disempower us, right? Knock us off our center so somebody else can gain an upper hand or gain a control, right?
And that's,
did you want to talk about self-esteem? Any thoughts on that you want to share?
Everybody's got issues with it. Whether you got too much of it or not enough of it, it doesn't really matter. Somebody, I can't see a lot of people who I don't see personally myself, but then people come to me because they have these issues. But I don't see a lot of people who don't, or haven't at some point in their life experienced an issue of confidence, right? It's really about self-esteem as confidence and recognizing that you've got the whatever it takes to do what it needs to do, right? So,
it's interesting. Let's talk a bit more about self-esteem, because sometimes people knock other people's self-esteem. Maybe they're trying to control you, or they want a certain outcome or a certain behavior. So they challenge your self-esteem and make you doubt yourself so that they can gain an upper hand. And I remember working with a woman, and when the first session before I went in, I went, wow, she's got self-esteem issues. And when we started our session and, I told her how I work and what to expect. And I said, it came up that you have self-esteem issues. And she said, I assure you, I do not have self-esteem issues. I have a beautiful company. I'm so proud of 20-year history. I have a beautiful husband. We have a beautiful home. She went on to describe herself. And I'm like, I'm not wrong. Like, why did this come up as self-esteem? And as we started talking about things, it turns out she was the president of a women's group. And she had brought in a lot of money. Well, all their charities wanted that money. So they basically started sending her psychic attack and making her feel bad about herself. So her self-esteem was caused by other people trying to knock her down. So we can look at self-esteem in so many other ways, right? So other people can cause another individual to have low self-esteem. The idea is you esteem yourself enough to say, and she does this thing now, back at you, sister. So she's learned how to put these two people or this group of people at bay. But it was just kind of funny watching that. And what they had done, they had manifested an etheric I got a rod in her shoulder. She couldn't lift her arm. And it had started when she became president. So they had sent an etheric rod into her, it was like a pinched nerve, but it was almost rusty or something. So it took us a bit to get that out. And she also used an osteopath to finish bringing that out so she could get her movement back in her arms. So this is interesting when we talk about self-esteem, because when you talk about disempowering us, the last thing certain power structures on this planet want is for us to understand how powerful we are, and to know how to command our own energies, command our mind, command our thoughts, how to project, whether it's decent energy or, when I say decent, I don't know if that's the right word, but I'm going to use an example. You had talked about your dream with Justin Trudeau. I had somebody sent me an email this week and she goes, do you remember when I sent you this before? And I'd forgotten she had sent it. She had a dream with Justin Trudeau and she sat there saying, look, buddy, we're not buying into any of this. And you still have one chance to get it right, which I don't believe he does. He's going to pay for what he did. People will still forgive you if you stop this nonsense now. But I know people have told me they've had Trump dreams, but I think we're starting to go into those higher realms of consciousness in dream state.
Well, now you're talking spiritual realm.
Yes.
That's not, I don't even believe that that's dream state. That's beyond, right? That's the higher consciousness. That's where it's all taking place, like
Yes.
all of it. You can meet them on that level because that's where they're fucking warring with us, pardon my French, but that's where it's playing out.
I know.
And we're down here, you know, kind of just trying to deflect, maneuver and navigate and get the heck out of the way and try to avoid whatever. Got to take it to their realm.
And I agree with that totally. So this is why all this is good, talking about self-esteem. If they've knocked your self-esteem down and you're doubting yourself and you don't trust in yourself, then you don't have a chance to say, show me what I need to know about my magnificence. Show me what I need to know about my extrasensory perceptions. Show me what I need to do in these altered states of consciousness. It's really important to stay curious as you're going through esteeming yourself and learning to trust yourself again. Because when you're curious, that's when you open yourself up to new things. A lot of people send me stuff on this flu thing. I'm like, I'm not saying I don't care about it. I want to watch and see how it operates, but this is just designed to slow us all down. So while we're watching everything that's going on with that flu thing that they're promoting right now, we're not saying, okay, these new energies are coming in. How do we raise our consciousness so that we can take, integrate with these new energies? Right. So this is and that's what control is all about. So many people have a control addiction. Well, you're trying to control somebody else. You can't soar and fly like an eagle. So it's just kind of interesting how I find it's interesting how that happens.
Yeah, and it really addresses now self-esteem. See, the trust and the self-worth kind of play in, of course, hand in hand to the self-esteem stuff. But what we're talking about is they, and we all know who they is, by the way. I'm not going to describe who, we all know. We know that there's an opposing force. That's they. That's them. We could refer to them very colorfully, but we won't bother. They know who they are too. This disempowerment is about our spiritual authority. And that's where our self-esteem, if we actually realize, like you said, that who we are and what we are capable of, and that we are worthy adversaries, which is why they had to dumb us down and get us down to the ground, because otherwise they know you spar off with us, you're done.
I know.
You're done. And that's the key. That's going to keep us in this low self-esteem. You're not worthy. You're not capable. You're not significant. You have no power. All deserving. Of this. And there's no one for you to trust in. You can't trust in yourself. There's no God that's within you. It's separate from you. And you're here all on your own. Sorry about your luck. Sucks to be you.
That's basically what they're doing to us, right? There's no doubt about it. That's what they want to do. So when we start looking at just how powerful we are, and I'm more and more people are telling us in dream state, they'll wake up in the morning, they have a dream and they're with somebody, they tell the person about the dream and they go, I know I was there with you. And this is why so many people are trying to keep everybody down, because they do not want us to know when we start commanding our mentalism, our mind energy, what we can accomplish, right? Can you imagine if all of us sent energy to the Parliament buildings? I don't think that's a good idea, because I think a lot is happening in Canada at the Parliament buildings right now. I don't think the MPs are in Parliament, the MPPs, right? Or the MPs are in Parliament. But when the time comes that we're going to start projecting our energy and sending it in such a way that they know we're going to etherically set boundaries with them. That's the new one, right? Etheric boundaries, and know how to do that.
That's exactly what you were speaking to earlier there about, you know, how do we, at what point are we in a place where we're vulnerable to somebody's opinion about our competence? Because really, if somebody can knock your self-esteem, it's because you're not sure enough in yourself, right? Like otherwise, nobody should hit you. The boundaries are there. And when you really come back into that trusting of yourself and understanding who you are, not understanding, understanding, because it's inside of us. We're not underneath any authority. We are the authority.
You know, it's interesting when we're talking about self-esteem, what I always say to people, anybody who I work with who has low self-esteem, they didn't get that way on their own. They didn't just all of a sudden wake up one day and decide they're an asshole. So somebody's either knocked them down, been rude to them, abused them, criticized them, minimized them, diminished them. So sometimes people need a hand to get back up to understand how magnificent they truly are. And then once you remind them of it a few times and they start telling themselves they got it already, they got it and they know, and nothing's going to shake them again. So it's almost like you have to go back and undo what programs you've been taught. And there's so many kinds of programs that affect self-esteem: religious programs, educational programs, cultural programs, educational programs, societal programs. I'm going to say gender as in one of two, that programming of what a man is or what a woman is, or, you know, all those types of opinions, and have been rammed down our throats. And was that you? I can't remember if I was talking to you about that, about the sinners. You know, we're raised, certain religions are raised to believe you're all sinners. Well, you're coming out of the gate and you're already going the wrong way. Like you're already doubting yourself instead of growing into your magnificence, right? So a lot of this is, it's high time this came to light. I'm really surprised. You know, we talk about mental health and everything that's going on right now, and the suicides and the depression and the anxiety. The problem is that industry never looks for what's good in you. They're always looking to see what's wrong in you so that they can label you, drug you, whatever, right? How can we expect to find something good in somebody if all we're looking for is what's wrong? So this is what's wrong with the system that is starting to drop, just to fall down, that they don't understand what it means to make a person phenomenal. What's it make to make a family phenomenal in communication, and whether it's physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and of course, sexual with the parents, a healthy sexual relationship. You know, like they don't teach any of that. They just sit there and just pick apart everything that's wrong in relationships or what you're doing wrong. And then they take the superior stance over you. So that gives the false sense of matrix in the system itself. And this is what I think we really need to start calling out, right? You give anybody power over you. And I know somebody told me one time, I was out for a walk, I can't remember if I said this last week, but she told me that her doctor told her she had cancer. And she said, well, I think I'm going to get a second opinion and look at alternative wellness modalities. He marked her down as disagreeable and said she had mental health issues because she wouldn't take his recommendation. So even when you don't listen to somebody else, there could be a consequence that you say instead, no, I am going to, I'll get back to you on this. But, you know, you don't have to, because they're a professional that you go to does not mean they have more power than you. You never give your power up to anybody.
Open to the second opinion. Like we used to always go for a second opinion because one person doesn't know everything.
But you can't tell that to one person sometimes. Like some people, you can't tell them that. So you have to sit and smile and nod and know when just to walk away and say, I'll be back to you, and just never contact them again. I've taken care of it. You know what I mean? Like, so it's interesting that we live in a society that doesn't want you to have self-esteem, because anybody who has low self-esteem, nothing personal, but people can push you around and they can control you. And that's why they want people second guessing themselves, and they want people doubting themselves. If you trust yourself, you trust what experts to go to for what? Give an example. I do not do well buying cars. It's not my shtick. I don't like it. I know what I want. I want some, and then I need somebody to go and help me pick one out that will give me what I want. But I'll tell you, I don't care about engine size as long as it doesn't sound like my mother's sewing machine. I care about color, heated seats, moonroof. Like past that, I'll never get my brain cells back if I have to learn how a car works. You know, I don't want to know that. So then I trust myself that I'm going to take the right person with me to purchase a car. Ta-da! So this is where all of us claiming our power back and esteeming ourselves appropriately. This is where we're going to change the frequency on the planet, if you ask me. And this is where all of a sudden we're going to start out vibrating the darkness. And, you know, I talk about that all the time, right? And I know we've shown this. what's his name, David Hawkins' cone of consciousness, right? But when we look, how many people try to put you into shame? Where am I here? Put you into shame or guilt. If you look at David, or what's his name, Gary Young's work, he says physical death registers at 25. So somebody's trying to shame you. Understand, they're trying to drop your energy so they can assume control. So when we start to look at all of these issues surrounding self-esteem, I know very few people, like I said, who got into low self-esteem issues all on their own. Somebody treated them poorly, maybe a parent judged them, or a sibling judged them, or a teacher judged them when they were growing and made them doubt themselves.
It's all personal perspective, right? And some of it could be past life even. We don't really know all of that, in terms of those people who believe in reincarnation or whatever. But yeah, and interesting. I just wanted to quickly mention before we get way off of it, but because that's what happens with our conversations, they just go. They have a momentum of their own. But I did go quickly. Opinion. First of all, opinion doesn't matter. But the energy that people feel about that opinion comes flying out. Gotta have some boundaries. But this whole taking back our power, I used to really have trouble in the beginning of my career. I would say to people, you got to take your power back, blah, 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 blah. And I had a really hard time kind of buying into that in a sense, because I started to question what that really meant. And then you've got people who are like, well, where the hell did I leave my power? Who did I give it to? How do I get it back? Where is it? What do I do? And I feel like so much more disempowered in that kind of quest for finding their power. They don't realize that they still have it. So dialing it down for another to overpower is kind of how I've been explaining it to people, that you've got to dial, right? You dialed yours down, so theirs overpowered yours. It's like a battle of the radio station, in the different apartment buildings or different apartments. One's just going to out volume the other in a way. And so when you realize where yours is sitting at, and mine goes to 11, that's it. You bring it back to dialing it up for you so that you are in that place of power, and they are no longer, even if you have to make it even, right? And that, so I just wanted to address that, because I do find that that's a big deal right now, and everybody has to take their power back from a spiritual standpoint. Your spiritual authority is imperative right now. But if you don't feel like you've got any power even in this third dimensional experience, you're not going to feel magnificent enough to take whomever in the spiritual realm. Period. So I just wanted to mention that, because it's really important that we recognize that it's all about the dial. Just dial yours back up to wherever you're comfortable and you feel strong, and then get a little bit going on. Dial it up a little further when you need to have a little extra oomph going on. Work your spiritual muscles. Hold on to that.
And I would agree with that. And also to add that sometimes people have self-esteem in some areas of their life and not others. So you might have self-esteem in your personal relationships, but at work, you've got it. So then you have to look at why you have self-esteem issues in certain aspects of your life, or it could be the exact opposite. You have enough self-esteem in your personal life, but at work, there's somebody there who maybe is intimidating you. So then it's okay to break it down even into all the aspects of life. Is it community? Is it your recreational group? Like maybe you play sports and somebody's trying to suppress you. I know people who play cards, and they say there's one woman that just keeps trying to knock the other woman down emotionally by making comments to her. So break it down to all the different aspects of your life. Maybe it's your romantic partner who's doing it to you. Maybe it's your boss who is intimidated because maybe you know more than the boss and they're threatened by you. So they have to make you feel stupid, maybe to get you to quit. So really break it down when you're looking at self-esteem. What areas in your life do you have it, and what areas do you excel in? Do people talk poorly about you or judge you? That's another one. People tell me sometimes that, well, so-and-so said this to me, and I'm like, why would you let them talk to you that way? Why would they think they have an opinion in your life? Why do they think their opinion matters in your life? You always have to look at the agenda of the person or the intention of the person. I don't care if it's a nefarious agenda, or if it's just that they're just not even aware they even do it. It's still their problem, not yours, not to let it land. And I like where you're talking about the past lives, because a few things have come up for me with that. And it took me a while to understand a certain pattern that kept reoccurring. And it was past lives. And I'm not saying, I don't know that I believe that we've been everything in every life. I'm not quite convinced I believe that. But one pattern kept coming up. And I noticed with some clients, it was coming up with a family member, that person was being suppressive, whether it's an abusive parent, sibling, it doesn't matter. But sometimes that's what you're here to do, is break that pattern of that person causing you pain and suffering. And that's just one that I've noticed. When we're talking, I like how you mentioned spirituality, because I want to interchange spirituality with consciousness. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the 5 colors. This is the visible spectrum of color with all 7 chakra colors. What's missing is the top 2. The third eye is your inner knowing. This is where these higher realms of consciousness comes in. And this is your connection to source, the violet, the purple. And what's happening right now, in my opinion, is this is with all the spiritual lore that's going on. They do not want you connecting with those higher sensory abilities that you have. So I like you're calling it spirituality, whether you call it awareness, consciousness, any of the above. Some people can call it God, whatever, source, creator, whatever that energy is for you. This is what they don't want you connecting to. And if that was the case, they wouldn't be putting something into a certain liquid that they want you to inject into yourself that stops that from happening and removes your absolute soul from your body. So when you start looking at agendas, sometimes what ends up happening is you can start to see this was never about me. So maybe your self-esteem issues, if you don't know how to read energy and you can't read somebody else's intention, the brunt of the joke might end up on you. But it doesn't mean that there's always a balance of energy, like you said, like +1 and -1. Are you over or under energy? But the idea is you want to be in the middle and not take what's not yours and have a false sense of entitlement, but nor will you allow anybody else to have a false sense of entitlement over you. Right? So this is all about balance too, is what the big one that comes in.
And I think everything is about balance. I mean, truly at this point, the way I see the bigger picture, we're all just balancing the books right now, balancing the books. And what we want to do, especially in this year of divine compensation, is ensure that as those books become balanced, we find ourselves more in a positive space than we do the negative. Because if we end up in the negative space, the darkness wins and they take over. And that's just not going to happen. Not on my watch anyway. And it's so cool. I'm wearing this new shirt today. It says blessed. Client/loving friend sent it to me. It was wonderful. On the back it says Jesus has my back. Love it. I love it when your clients know you so well, right, that they can send you something or you read it. But anyway, but that's the point, because we do win. We do come out on a higher level and a higher consciousness. Most of us, just like, most of us will. Those who opt for the other option, they're going that way. They're doing that thing. That's part of the deal as far as I'm concerned. But at the same time, it is about consciousness and raising ourselves to a higher vibration so that we can stay in that and know that as we do, we are blessed. And it's in that blessing frequency, right? Those higher realms, that's where we need to stay. And we've got to make sure that as this balancing out occurs, we do find ourselves more in the black than we will.
And a lot of people have to clear that out, though. Like I was talking about shame, if somebody wants you in shame or guilt or grief or fear, they're lowering your frequency, especially if you do not have an opportunity to free yourself from whatever that is. Maybe that person has more power over you. Maybe you're younger and you can't get out. You need to stay there because you need a roof over your head. Like, who knows, whatever the reasons are. But the idea is to understand why you're there. I have clients who tell me they have anger issues, and it's about clearing all this out. So anger vibrates at 150, fear at 100. And I said, you realize that might have saved your life someday because it brought your vibration up. So I don't look at any of the emotions as negative or positive. I look at it that you want to feel it. Maybe you need to grieve. I've got some people that are really upset. People around them are having adverse effects to a certain procedure and they needed to grieve. Don't stay in it all the time. But so I do agree with the positive energy that you want to be in a more positive game. But part of that is knowing that you're not going to succumb to certain things that people are projecting on you, like fear. That's a big one for me. Do not succumb to somebody else's bullshit. I like how you talked about having your back. Jesus has your back, because it took me a long time to figure this out. But I remember going to different events and we sat down and I went with a person who was trying to get into politics. He asked me to go because they were talking about child trafficking and stuff like that. And he wanted me to be able to speak because he wasn't as versed on it. We sat at a round table facing the speaker, and I sat here and he sat behind me. And there's a few other people on the other side of the table. All of a sudden, this guy comes in and he's got red, bloodshot, beady little eyes. He's got a blue blazer, white shirt on, he's got tan pants. And I realized he wanted to sit behind the guy behind me because he wanted to project his shit on him, because most people don't put their energy on their back. They don't watch their own back. So it's interesting when you start to look on the etheric, how somebody can attack you and it's not even your stuff, right? I'm big on accountability, personal accountability, and don't take what's not yours. So it's got to be an accountability that balances on the opposite side of this. And it's like when I talk about boundaries, when you research what they say about boundaries, it's always about defending yourself against somebody else's attack. Nowhere does it say, stop being a son of a bitch. Stop taking what's not yours. And this is where this really needs to come out. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, yeah, I'm ready. I'm lining up the next comment.
Right? So this is all pretty good. So do you notice that we live in an interactive society. To assume that everything is the fault of yourself is unrealistic, because we don't know the emotional maturity of the people around us in the collective. We don't know the intention of the people who are tasked to do certain jobs, if you'll call it that, in our society, that society needs certain things. We don't know what their intentions are. We don't know if they're just hired because they're stupid, but it doesn't make them less dangerous if they don't know what they're doing or the impact it's going to have on people. So it's not enough just to look and say, why do I have self-esteem issues? And a lot of people do the preaching of, well, you got here on your own. You must have done a contract for this. And it's not necessarily true. Maybe you got shaken so much in your youth that you didn't know how to set proper boundaries, and somebody's hijacked this. And that's what I think of when I look at all the programming in the AI and all the radio broadcast technology. That's somebody else's creation that had a nefarious agenda for you. It doesn't mean you signed up for that. You might be in the middle of this pile, but it doesn't mean that that this is yours.
Absolutely not. Yep.
Do you know what's interesting? We're running out of time soon, because I'm only on the 45-minute one. So we might have to, let's go and ask questions and see if anybody has any questions. Anybody have any questions about self-esteem? If you do you want to unmute yourself? Or if I can unmute you? Andrea, do you have any questions? She's frozen there, so I'm not quite sure what's happening there. Andrea, do you have any questions?
Do I know? No. Just that I'm relating to some of this stuff.
Okay, so how did that happen? Because she's muted. So I don't know what just happened there.
I was really,
So I don't
I'm
know.
unmuted.
Did you unmute
You
him
hear
in,
now?
Andra?
Yeah,
Do
I
you have
did.
questions?
Can you hear me?
You're really breaking
No,
up.
just that
there.
I was relating to a lot of this.
Say that again.
Not surprised. I'm not surprised. We're having internet issues here.
Okay. Did you have a question? Did you want to write it in the chat?
Especially with the work that we're doing.
We didn't hear any of that. You're definitely having internet issues, because we can't hear anything you're saying. If you want to write it in the chat, go ahead and hopefully we can get to that.
Can I make a quick comment? Do you mind? You mentioned about boundaries and how people often think it's about, other people. I've often encouraged people to realize that boundaries are not just about other people. In fact, they're predominantly about you, ensuring your sacred space. You're entitled to that space. So many people don't realize they are, and to me, that's 6 diameter that is so popular right now.
Yeah.
you know?
And it is about your claiming your sacred space, but my point was that other people can influence how you esteem yourself. That was the point I was making, and I do agree with that. So I have a feeling we've only got about 7 minutes left to go. So just because I never thought to do an upgrade on this Zoom, I forgot you're only allowed 2 people anymore, that you have to buy a certain package, and I forgot about that. But and definitely about the boundaries, that you have the right, knowing you have the right to claim boundaries. And there's mental, emotional, spiritual, physical, and sexual boundaries. You have the right in any of those realms to set your intention of what you expect and set your standards on this, because we're not taught to set standards. If you stand up for yourself, or if you have rules, then you're a prude, or you have you have control issues. They always invert it back on the person who's trying to set the boundaries for themselves. Here we go. I'm relating a lot of especially how when I was a child with boundaries and how I didn't have them. And I hear you, Andrea. I hear that. I totally get that. But you weren't taught to have boundaries, because if you had boundaries, then you couldn't be controlled. And even in school, they don't want you to have boundaries. If you speak out or you don't follow what they want to medicate you. So there's always a consequence in a controlling society. Always a consequence. And that's the problem with it, because somebody else is now dictating what's acceptable for you or not. And this is the problem this is what's changing, is we're creating a new environment going forward, that people are going to learn to speak up for themselves, but they're going to learn they have the right to speak up for themselves, and they're not going to let somebody shame them to keep them quiet or withhold love. Like, there's a lot of topics that we haven't even talked about here, right? But some people withhold love as a form to get you to give up your self-worth so that you belong, but then over time that affects your self-esteem. If that makes sense. I want to make one correction before I forget. And part of this is what we're talking about emotional maturity, is if you make a mistake, admit you made a mistake. It's okay. Doesn't mean it's the end of the world. Last week I had talked about schools, 24 schools in St. Catharines and Niagara Falls who were human trafficking the children. I found out this week that wasn't quite right. What they were doing was, at the lunch program, they were sitting in the cafeteria and deciding which children would be more easily trafficked. So whoever's in the lunch program at the cafeteria, and I'm thinking about a friend of mine who told me she was putting in a breakfast program in their school. The school board kicked them out and put their own people in, of course, because if you're going to traffic these children, there's no way they can talk to anybody else. This is how sick this society is. How many of these children will end up with low self-esteem because of that happening to them?
Products of the environment. We
Product
all
of
are.
the environment, totally, right?
Well, we learn that we are the masters of this environment, and this is our dominion to be, ruling for ourselves, reigning over, we'll say. We're all going to be susceptible, in a sense, and vulnerable, because you can't stand in the middle of a desert and have the sand flying around and not get weather beaten. It's just bound to happen. And I'd love to say not, but again, you got to be a pretty strong piece of marble or whatnot to not be affected by the pitting, right? That constant at you stuff. And that's the key. Alignment plays a major part, because you're going to attract to you the things that need to help you make yourself strong, right? They need to empower you.
Sometimes.
Help.
But sometimes it's not always true, because sometimes you'll have an abuser that's not here to empower you. And until we change that mindset, I think that we're going to accept certain abuses. But when you're talking about the desert, think of the lone trees on a rock by a body of water. It's going to grow crooked, but you'll go further inland and there's a stand of trees, and they're going to grow straighter because they've got the proper supports. So a lot of times we don't have those supports in our society. And it's encouraged not to have that. So I think we're here to make a change. There's no doubt about that. But I don't put it on to the people who've been hurt, because what I find is a lot of times they didn't have the wherewithal to stand up and just say no. I'm working with one woman. When she was a child, she was like, they would torment her, and she would turn around and start swinging. She goes, it didn't matter how many were standing. She would get into such a rage that she would start swinging. That's the only way she could defend herself. She said there was never anybody standing by the time I was done. And she has so much shame around that. And I'm like, wait a minute, they were tormenting you. We all have a responsibility in taking, we all have to take responsibility for what we do to cause other people harm. And it doesn't mean it was done intentionally, but we still have to realize that if you're seeing this happen within your family, And you know, many people told me that the parents used to pit them against each other because it was entertaining. You know, these are things that are just, it's hard on people, right? But, you know, we've only got a few minutes left. Brenda, do you want to say anything, like any lasting comments? Last comments?
No, the next time we'll make the next one longer. I've
Well-
got lots of time to say it in, but I have the package, so we can do it on my Zoom next time.
And I never even thought about it because I just never even thought about it. So, but this is a great intro for more people if you want to talk about emotional intelligence and emotional boundaries and emotional maturity. And like, I hope everybody hears it in our voice. We're not putting anybody down. We're not judging anybody. We're just trying to look at what has caused it and what we can do to get through it, because we're going to be needed going forward to be able to understand those higher sensory perceptions and get into our higher realms of consciousness and go in and do battle on these planes. And when I say do battle, it doesn't mean we're going to go and create a homicide or something on in an etheric plane, but these people have to be held accountable. But for that to happen, we have to understand how powerful we really are.
I think too, real quickly, in an essence, you know, what we want to sort of what my goal is to teach people is not just self-empowerment, but understanding that we're all on an even playing field here, that these people are not, see, the deal is that we have this kind of subservience, right? We have to be submissive because, oh, big brother's watching, or the government is a more powerful authority than we are, and all of this shit, like your parents and all that crap. No, none of it. There's no more.
Yeah, no
Equal.
more. Yeah, and I agree totally. But we're down to less than a minute, Brenda, so I think we're about to cut out. We'll put our contact information in the description box. Anybody wants to reach out or ask us questions, and we'd be happy to help. So have a good one. Happy Friday.
Friday. Take care, y'all. Bye now.
Bye-bye.